this is Kyle, also known as Alientude, reviewing today this Scorpion Swords Orc War Cleaver. Now, this sword is discontinued. You can't buy it anymore. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Scorpion Swords would make it if you contacted them. They have a large number of models, and this one fits into their design aesthetic perfectly. Even though it wasn't their design, from what I understand, I believe this was part of a sword design contest on the Sword Buyer's Guide forum. I don't know that this is exact design. I don't have all the details. But like I said, this fits the Scorpion Swords aesthetic perfectly. When this was new, it sold for $314, including the leather sheath, which we'll get to in a minute. And I did not pay anything for it. This was sent to me by my friend, Kane Shen, who had bought it and didn't really want it. So he asked me if I wanted to review it. I said, sure. He sent it to me and he doesn't want it back. So it's mine now. So this is going to be my review of Scorpion Swords, this sword, but also the company a little bit, because their aesthetic doesn't really vibe with me. So it's kind of unlikely that I will be buying any of their swords. So this will be a way for me to get something about them on the channel. So like I said, this one does have a leather sheath. I believe this added $30 or $40 to the cost. It is very simple. It's two pieces of leather riveted together. There are some cuts here so you could hang it on a belt. That's pretty much all there is to say about it. It fits in here, sure. It's not going to hold tightly. I'm holding the blade right now, but as soon as I let go of the blade, it starts sliding out. So it's not a tight fit. It is very simple, and that's pretty much it. I haven't tried wearing this, but with how long the hilt is, plus how pointy the glass breaker is, I feel like this would be problematic. I'm just doing this. I don't like the way that feels. So I don't think wearing this would be particularly comfortable. Moving on to the sword itself, let's start with the hilt. It has that glass breaker style pommel. It's not a pommel, it's one piece of metal with the tang and the blade. This is a hefty amount of metal. It's got a very large hole drilled through it that you could use as a lanyard hole. The corners of that hole are pretty sharp. I would be a little concerned if I were to put a lanyard in there, it would end up cutting it after not particularly long. I'm sure this is a very effective glass breaker though, because this point is quite the point. The grip is made of walnut and it's pinned with 3 pins. I think they're made of brass is what they look like. And the walnut has a really nice look to it. It's probably my favorite part of the look of this sword. I like the stain that they put on this walnut. The grip itself is a little bit big and chunky for my hands, especially right up here where you get into, there's no guard, but where it kind of swells up a little bit to help your hand from running up onto the blade. It's just a little bit chunky in my hands. I don't feel like I have a great grip on it. In addition, there are some very slight edges on the tang that stand proud over the grip. This is very, very, very common on this style of handle construction with climate changes, humidity in the air. The wood contracts, it swells, and it makes it a little bit uncomfortable, honestly. It's not sharp enough that it really bit into my hands when I was using it, but it does kind of rub against the hands in an uncomfortable manner. Now you can get wood that won't do that. I believe it needs to be very well stabilized, but I have some examples of this type of hilt construction where the wood has not expanded or contracted at all, and there's absolutely no ridges at all. So it is possible at this price point. Maybe not quite so possible. I don't know the cost of materials. The pins also stand a little bit proud, just enough where when you wrap your hands around the grip, you feel them. It's not particularly painful or anything like that, but it is noticeable. The actual tang is finished a little bit differently than the rest of the blade. There's a blackening, as you can see on the blade, and the tang doesn't actually have that, or it has worn off. Not sure which it is. This, like I said, this didn't come to me new. I don't know how much Kane used it. I haven't used it a ton, but I've certainly used it a little bit in preparation for this review. Moving on to the blade. Now, I should mention this is stated as being made of 1095 steel, heat treated to 57 HRC. I don't have files, so I can't test that, but that's what it is. Like I just said, it has a blackening on it that I don't know exactly what it's done, how it's done, but it's been pretty durable on the blade from what I can see. One interesting thing is that this has sat in my garage in the leather sheath for 3 years, around there, and there's pretty much no patina or rust developing on it. There's maybe a few spots, but very, very minor. That's a little confusing to me. I would expect 1095 to rust faster than that, especially with no oil on it whatsoever. Now, I do live in a very dry climate most of the time. The desert where I live is very, very dry. It does get very humid during, flash floods and monsoons and rainstorms and stuff, but it's not like when I keep swords indoors. Indoors, we use an evaporative cooler, which makes the house quite humid, so I have to be very careful with oiling my swords. This is lived in the garage where it's generally dry most of the time. That might affect it. I don't know. I'm just surprised it hasn't really rusted. I would expect after multiple years it to have developed a decent amount of rust. Well, it hasn't. Kudos to Scorpion swords. Now, the blackening, I'm sure, is helping a great deal with that. But the edge bevel is not blackened, and it looks fine as well. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it's good to see that it has not rusted. So moving on to the actual details of the blade, my first thing I want to say is this is, I think, a pretty clear, it pretty clearly takes inspiration from the Chinese Da Dao. I did a review of the Chen Da Dao a few months ago. I'll link that so you can see it, and this sword actually makes an appearance in that video as well. It's got a very Da Dao style look to it with some fantasy flair, because this is most definitely a fantasy blade. This little, I'm not sure what to call these little spots here. I would think they kind of look like they're intended to be a saw blade, but they're not nearly done right to be a saw, an effective saw. This would not work at all. It's got this choil here. This little tip is very, very sharp. With the way how the grip widens out a lot, I wouldn't want to wrap my finger into that choil. I don't think it does really anything other than give it some decorative flair. The blade has no distal taper until it gets to this clip point, and then it has a very minor amount of distal taper until it gets to the tip. This clip point is also not sharp, which bugs me a little bit. You've got a bevel here, but it ends in a 2 millimeter edge, something like that. I don't see the point of this bevel if this is not going to be brought to at least close to sharp. Speaking of the bevel, this is something that you'll see on pretty much all Scorpion swords. They have very short bevels with very meaty midsections of the blade. The bevel on this starts right here, and it's the same throughout, exact same thickness from the spine all the way to the bevel, and then it's a very sharp bevel, so it's a thick edge. It's not a refined edge. It's not going to be a super cutter because the geometry just isn't really there. The edge geometry is just thick, and that doesn't make for particularly great cutting. It can make for very effective chopping, and it certainly makes for good durability, but not really for cutting. The overall lines of the blade are reasonably straight. The fuller is pretty wonky. It wobbles around a little bit, but it's a very shallow fuller. It's really not doing anything for reducing the weight of the sword. It's just there for looks. The planes, there's no rippling on it, but that's pretty much because, from what I can tell, this is a flat bar that's cut to shape, and then the edge bells are put in. There's not a ton of grinding being done to shape the blade. It's clearly cut to shape. In fact, Scorpion swords will post quite often a batch of swords that they get in to be made, and they're all cut to shape. So they're not grinding to shape, they're grinding in the bevels, that kind of thing. So there's no rippling because it was a metal bar when it got to them. So let's talk about using this sword. Now, I'm not going to do a paper cut test because I've honked this into wood a decent number of times. Any sharpness it had, that, the kind of sharpness that's needed for cutting paper, if it had that, it's long gone by now. It was not sharp enough to cut paper when I first got it, though. It is not a sharp edge. There's no bite to it. I'm feeling it. It's not biting. It's not going to cut anything. I could slide my fingers along it. It's not a sharp blade at this point. It probably wouldn't be that hard to sharpen it up, though. So using this, let's talk about the design goal of this sword. And to me, looking at this sword, this is an apocalyptic weapon, right? This is a weapon that you take into the apocalypse to be able to chunk zombies in the head, use as a tool, and kind of be your trusty sidearm that gets you through trouble, but can also, act as a wood chopper, act as a pry bar, all those kind of things that, you need. And it's designed, to me, to serve that purpose. Especially, it's got that glass cutter on there if you need to smash a window open or something like that. So to me, that's what the design goal of this sword is. And Scorpion swords, their entire selling point, and at least their marketing strategy for me, seems to be super durable swords. So to me, that means this sword needs to be very durable and usable in a wide variety of situations. So let's first look at it as a tool. All right, I apologize for the lighting here, but this is about the only time I can come outside and do anything. So I have a stump here and the Scorpion swords, and I'm gonna see what a moderate use does to it. I'm gonna chop into the stump a little bit, whack the side of it a little bit, just try to get a feel for how the sword feels in my hands, if there's any shock on it, and also if there's any damage to it or if it bends or anything like that. So really, that's about it. Perfectly straight still. The edge, it's a little dark to see, but doesn't look like it took any damage at all. The offhand here gets a lot of shock when hitting a hard target. Now that was moderate use. It was still probably in the abusive territory because, I'm hitting a pretty hefty hunk of wood there. But I was going 50 to 60% speed. So not terribly abusive, but probably on the abusive side. But at the same time, this is a sword for the apocalypse. At least that's the way I see it. It better be able to support a little bit of moderate abuse. All right, so you can see there, it survived honking into that wood quite successfully. There's no damage to it at all. I will say after I did that and was back sitting down, just kind of relaxing, I noticed my primary hand was aching a little bit from that as well. So there were a decent amount of reverberations through the whole blade. It wasn't particularly comfortable to smack this into wood. So whether or not that's going to be a problem, it wasn't super painful, but at the same time I was going at very light effort, like 50 to 60%, like I said. So if I was going full effort, it probably would hurt more. I don't know if that's going to be a problem for you. I wouldn't want my tool to be hurting me every time I swing it against something hard. So I've also used this, tried to use this as a basic machete. I had some plants I was trimming back, and it really didn't work very well there, either because it's heavy and it's balanced like right around there. But there's so much hilt and so much weight back here that it's hard to really get it moving to deliver really effective chops. But at the same time, I feel like it should be a good machete because, you should be able to deliver good chopping with it. I just don't find it works very well against brush. That probably means it needs to be sharpened up some. You don't want to put a razor sharp edge on something like that, but probably does need to be a bit sharper. I don't do a ton of machete work, frankly. It's one of the reasons I moved to the desert, so I don't have to do a ton of yard work. So I don't find this to be a particularly effective tool for my purposes. I could see it being kind of useful as, like I said, that pry bar, breaking windows. I could see it being useful there. I wouldn't want to use it for that. Now, let's talk about using it as a sword. So the first thing I'm going to say is you have an extremely short reach with this blade. That is about 18 inches of blade. For a hilt, that's 14 inches, right around there. You have almost no reach with this sword, which is problematic in using it as a weapon because reach is, in many ways, king when fighting, and you don't have it here. If you're fighting a zombie, zombie apocalypse, that's what a lot of people like to look at. This is going to require you to get very close to the zombies before you can cleave into their head. And you may not want to get that close to a zombie, but it's also going to deliver very, very powerful blows. So if you deliver it into a zombie head, that zombie's going to be feeling it. But it moves around clunky because it's quite hefty. Like I said, there's basically no distal taper until you get to that clip point. So it just has a slow and slightly dumb feeling about it. It doesn't flow. It doesn't move well. I don't want to do like multiple cuts with it because it's just slow. It's clunky and it is so short that accelerating the tip is difficult because the longer the blade, the faster that tip's going to go when you accelerate the blade. And this is short, so it doesn't accelerate as fast. So that loses some cutting ability because of that. What it gains is in chopping and just destructive force and kinetic force, but not really a great cutter. And I did put this against a couple water bottles, not very many. It wasn't fun to use against water bottles. This was before I chopped into wood, so the edge presumably was a little bit sharper then, but it still wasn't sharp pretty much at all. So not really a fun backyard cutter. I imagine sharpening up the edge will help that a lot, but it also just feels weird because of how short it is. It just doesn't move the way I want it to move. All right, let's talk about value. This sword sold new for $315 when it was available. Was it worth that price? Well, for me, no, not really. I don't find it a particularly good sword, a particularly good tool. I don't like the way it looks. I don't think it would fit on the belt well with how sharp this point is. Overall, I think it's just trying to be a little too many things and not succeeding at any of them. And in addition, it's not refined enough for my taste. The fact that there's absolutely no distal taper with a pretty thick sword, it just ends up feeling clunky and a little bit dumb. So for just over $300, I could have got this, or I could have got this axe, this machete, this kukri, and this katana. So for me, being able to buy all those for pretty much the exact same price as this, I'd much rather have the variety. You've got a machete to act like a machete. You've got an axe for chopping wood, splitting wood, doubling as a weapon. You've got a kukri for a whole host of things. Kukris are time proven tool and weapon. And then you've got a katana for your zombie cleaving. So to me, I would much rather have those. Now that is definitely a lot harder to carry all that than one sword. But you could also start taking away stuff. Maybe you don't need the axe because you have the kukri. The katana is pretty easy to wear. The kukri is very easy to wear. The machete doesn't have a sheath, but that would be pretty easy to make. I think overall, those tools and weapons are a much better package deal that's going to get you more bang for your buck than just one sword. And one sword that doesn't really do anything as well as any of those weapons and tools do. So while I understand the desire for a one all-purpose tool, I don't think this is it. If I were going to try to find that one sword or one tool that can double as a weapon that is going to be the potential sidearm for pretty much all of the apocalypse, I'm probably going to go for a kukri. Time-tested. They've been used in Nepal for decades, if not longer. They are vicious weapons. They are highly effective tools. And like I said, they are extremely time-proven. They work very, very well. Now, one other elephant in the room, the Chen Da Dao. Much better sword. And honestly, probably at least as durable as this one. Just as simple of a construction. It has a cord wrap over the wood scales, but that's really it. That's about the only difference, but it's got a lot more refinement. It's a much better sword. It'd probably be at least as effective of a tool, and it costs less than the Scorpion swords. Quick correction here. It costs almost the exact same at $320 direct from Chen. That to me says it all. I would rather have the Chen Military Da Dao. I would rather have that assortment of weapons and tools that I just showed. I don't think this sword is worth it. And that's going to wrap up this review. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Alien Toot out.